Shalom, brothers and sisters who have arrived here on this channel. Could the rapture happen in the last day of the year 5993, the same day where a total ring of fire solar eclipse will happen? I believe it can, because this coming solar eclipse, it's huge. There are many confirmations that I personally received about it, and I also received on a dream that the rapture could indeed happen on this moment. But before I tell you how strong this eclipse is, I'm going to show you that God has been pointing for us precise dates for the past 3 years with eclipses. So lunar eclipses have been pointing Passover and Tabernacles since 2021. And you see here that Passover in May 20, 2021 was a total lunar eclipse, a blood red moon. Also on Tabernacles on the 18th of November 2021, another lunar eclipse. In 2022 on the 15th of May, total lunar eclipse, and also on the 7th of November 2022, another total lunar eclipse. And then in 2023 we had a Passover on 5th of May 2023 that wasn't a full blood moon eclipse, but it was a penumbral eclipse where the moon gets darker. And also in Tabernacles of this year 2023 on the 28th of October 2023, that's when the moon will also have a penumbral eclipse. I like to point out that for the Jews in 2021, 2022 and 2023, they were in all these years 1 month in advance from the true calendar, based on the sky clock where the sun, moon and stars points the dates of the feasts for us. So the Jews, they were 1 month in advance in all of these 3 years. That's why they missed this incredible tetrad that happened in blood moons for Passover and Tabernacles, and also they are missing the eclipses that are happening in 2023. To add this even further, solar eclipses have been pointing the 1st of Nisan and the 1st of Tishrei since 2022. So we see here that in the 1st of Nisan, 30th of April 2022, it happened a partial solar eclipse. Also in the 25th of October 2022, we had another partial solar eclipse pointing the 1st of Tishrei. Nisan is the first month, biblical month, and Tishrei is the 7th biblical month. Nisan is the month of Passover, and Tishrei is the month of the fall feasts, such as trumpets. Then we had again in 2023 a total solar eclipse on the 20th of April 2023, pointing the 1st of Nisan. And we will have this coming solar eclipse, which will be a ring of fire eclipse on the 14th of October 2023, pointing the first day of Tishrei. And if you follow up in 2024, we also will have total solar eclipses pointing the 1st of Nisan and the 1st of Tishrei for 2024 in April the 8th and October the 2nd. These dates here, these eclipses are huge. They are pointing clearly a special moment in time for the Jews and for the church, in which we can expect that the rapture might happen within those dates, because they are very relevant dates for the Bible, and also because they show us that there is a coming judgment for the world, which we know will be the 7 years tribulation. So such an alignment like this, I don't believe it happened in a long time, and only those that are seeing the true calendar based on the sun, moon and stars instead of the Jewish calendar can perceive how incredible this is. So we had a blood moon tetrad in 2021, 2022, and we're having a total solar eclipse tetrad happening in 2023 and 2024. And between them we had partial solar eclipses and partial or penumbral lunar eclipses to switch them over one to the other. So it is incredible, and the things that are pointing to this coming eclipse on the 14th of October, they are huge, because could be the date for the rapture of the church, or close to the date for the rapture of the church. So the first thing that I want to show you guys here on this eclipse is that Elon Musk tweeted this image here, or this video, this short video here on his Twitter with an X, and you can clearly see the ring of fire here that he's showing for millions of people in his Twitter. And he posted this precisely on October the 7th. That's when Israel entered into war. Many channels were talking about this. It is very relevant because we know that Israel in war means that there is a war in the Middle East, could cook up to be a huge third world war, or could be the war that will bring the Antichrist, which is their Messiah, bringing the peace and security that they want to build the third temple. So very interesting, the fact that it's happening in Israel, a war right now, and Elon Musk tweeted this. So this is the first thing pointing to the solar eclipse that is coming on October 14. Also, we had this video game called Tomb Raider, and on this video game they are pointing out also the Ring of Fire eclipse happening there on the constellation of Virgo. I don't know how they saw the constellation of Virgo here. Perhaps somebody that plays the game know this, but the theme for this game is an apocalypse. It's about to happen, and this video game here happens within Central America, which is very relevant because we know that the total solar eclipse happening in the constellation of Virgo will go through Central America as well. Precisely, it will start there at Corpus Christi, which is the body of Christ, and it will end in Brazil called Natal, which is birth. So very interesting, the places that it begins and ends. Begins on the body of Christ, ends on birth. Very interesting, and going through Central America, just like the video game here was showing, and it is related to apocalypse. We also had an old movie called The Left Behind, the movie, and you can see here on the cover that they created this ring of fire here that looks like an eclipse as well, pointing to perhaps this solar eclipse that will be happening on the 14th of October. It is interesting that this old movie here was showing this ring of fire, so it is interesting that it is related to the rapture. Also, talking about the rapture, there is a coming relaunch of the album called The Rapture from Eclipses and the Banshees. They will relaunch this album called The Rapture precisely when? Precisely on the 14th of October 2023, the date of the eclipse. If all of these signs that have been showing us the date of the eclipse and the eclipse itself aren't enough, then take a look at this series here called The Leftovers. The Leftovers, it is a series that talks about the rapture, and I have here a small video where they are showing precisely this here. So they are talking about the rapture. Take a look.
Disappearance of 2% of the world's population.
So the disappearance of 2% of the world population, that's their take on the rapture of the church. And what's very interesting is that when does the rapture happen in that series? And you can see here that she speaks about when that happened.
Every one of us was touched by the events of October 14th, but no one.
So precisely on October the 14th, that's when the rapture happened on the series The Leftovers. So very interesting that this also is pointing to the eclipse on October the 14th. This series came out 3, 4, 5 years ago talking about the rapture, and this coming eclipse here, very interesting, precisely falling on October the 14th. We also had this video here from Vanessa Carlton. It's a music video called Ordinary Day, and interesting the name for this video clip, because Ordinary Day, the days will be ordinary, people will be buying and selling, marrying and giving into marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark and nobody perceived it. So until the day the rapture happened and nobody realizes it. What is very interesting about this video clip here is that she's singing here while people are just laying down watching the skies. When the total solar eclipse happens, everybody's watching, the total solar eclipse takes place, and after the solar eclipse, what happens? People start to vanish here. So people start to vanish after the solar eclipse. Very interesting that this music video from Vanessa Carlton 14 years ago is showing that the rapture happens after a total solar eclipse. So aside from all of these signs that are pointing to the solar eclipse in October the 14th, I started to think that the rapture could happen at this moment because a random brother out of nowhere came to me talking about the possibility of the rapture happening on October 14th, because also October 14th will be precisely 6 months until the next total solar eclipse, which will start the month of Nisan on 2024. And then one day later, another brother came to me talking about the possibility of the rapture also happening on October 14 by another point of view. And then when I prayed about it, on the same day I had a dream, which I understood in that dream that the rapture was happening on the solar eclipse. So because of all of that, I compiled this information for you guys, because it is a lot of things pointing for this coming solar eclipse, because aside of all of these signs and the confirmation that I have with 3 testimonies, 2 brothers and myself, I also know that this eclipse here will be falling here on the last day of the prophetic year of 5993. That precisely points that there are only 7 or 6 full years and a day remaining to the 6th millennium, because we know that the Jews, they are wrong in 210 years, and they are also 1 month in advance. So for the Jews, they are on the year 5784, but in fact we are in 5993 changing to 5994. So we had a lot of these signs pointing to this coming eclipse, also prophetically being the last day for the year 5993, and that is already by itself very, very important. So this coming solar eclipse here is going to be huge. It's falling precisely on the constellation of Virgo, on the hand of Virgo, also on the sheaf of wheat. So that could be harvesting, that could be wedding, because it's ring of fire, and the constellation of Virgo can point to the bride of Christ. But what is more interesting is that when I started to think about it, I realized that solar eclipses, they happen when the sun and the moon, they are both together in the same place, and the moon covers the sun's light for a brief period of time. So this one that is coming on 14th of October will be falling here in the Virgin, but to begin the 7th month, the month of Libra. And the one 6 months from now will happen in the constellation of Pisces towards the constellation of Aries, which is the first constellation. However, it is easy to think about that they are happening on the 1st of Tishrei and the 1st of Nisan, but we do know that the first day of a month can only happen when we see the sliver of the new moon. So this should be the correct first day of the first month, or first day of any month, when we see this first sliver of the new moon. And when that happens, it cannot be a total solar eclipse, because for the total solar eclipse to happen, they have to be precisely together in the same spot. And that only happens on the last day of the previous month, and not on the first day of the new month. So the total solar eclipse that is happening here, for example in 2024, will be the last day of Adar, which is the last day of the constellation of Pisces. And the solar eclipse that is happening on October 14, which will be now, it is not the first day of Tishrei. It will be actually the last day of Elul. So, in truth here, we are watching the total solar eclipse point both the last day of the Virgo, the last day of the Virgin, and the last day of Pisces. So you can understand that perhaps God is pointing out that the age of the Pisces, the church, which we are the fishes that have been caught by his gospel. So the age of the fishes and the age of the virgins, they're coming to an end. So we are seeing here that those solar eclipses fall in the last day of the month before the new moon is sighted. So we are seeing that the last day of Pisces and the last day of Virgins, they are being pointed out by total solar eclipses, and this one coming on October 14 will be the Ring of Fire eclipse. And the blood moons, they point out also Passover and Tabernacles, which are both feasts, and those can only happen when the sun are in Aries and in Libra, and the moon is precisely opposed to the sun. That's why there is a total lunar eclipse. So the blood of the lamb is being judged when the sun and moon are aligning to have a total lunar eclipse on those feasts. And the solar eclipses, they are pointing the last day of Adar, which is Pisces, and the last day of Elul, which is Virgin. So very interesting. It seems like God is pointing out the end of the church, the end of the age of the fishes, the Pisces, and the end for the virgins, the brides that are going to the wedding with the Lamb. So we are seeing here that God is definitely pointing out these last 3 years for us, coming to a very important close on 2023 and 2024. But we know that 2023 is more prophetically important for us because it closes out the 7-year tribulation by 2030, which will be precisely 2,000 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. So very interesting, because the solar eclipses are pointing here the last day for the Pisces, the fishes, and the last day for Virgo, the Virgin. And if we watch here on the timeline where we are right now, we just went past the confirmation here for the 2030 agenda from many nations, and they could not sign the 7 years deal there because the rapture hasn't happened yet, but they prepared it for sure for when it happens, because the G20 nations, they are announcing a plan to impose digital currencies and IDs worldwide. So they are planning to make every citizen go inside this digital trap that they are making in order for it to be taken to the Antichrist when he comes. Because digital currencies will give full control to the government, decide every single detail of a person's life. So people will not be able to buy or sell without government approval of anything. So if they don't have this digital ID, perhaps an ID that will come with a health passport, perhaps an ID that will come with something that is implanted in your hand or forehead, without that you won't be able to buy or sell, because everything will be digital currency. So the G20 nations, they are preparing for this. So for sure they could not make this 7 years deal of this 7-year covenant from Daniel 9:27 on that date that they were expecting, because the rapture didn't happen. However, for sure they prepared the way for this to be put forth as soon as the rapture happens. And then we are now moving closer to the date of the solar eclipse, which will be the 14th of October. And the very high watch date will be the date of the solar eclipse. They're happening in the Virgin. That could be the moment for the rapture of the church, because that not only is the last day of the Virgin, the last day of the year 5993, which will give us 6 full years in a day for it all to end in the 6th millennium. But also it will be the day before the Feast of Trumpets. So very interesting this moment here for the rapture to happen. And if you are following the news here, you see that Israel entered war the 7th of October, precisely 7 days before the eclipse. That is precisely 50 years after the Yom Kippur War in 1973. So it is a jubilee since that war, and they entered the war at that moment. And on the 7th of October, it is the first day of the Feast of Oil. So the Feast of Oil started when Israel entered the war, and the Feast of Oil will end precisely on the total solar eclipse in the Virgin. And the coming next day after it, that will be the first day of Tishrei, the first day of the 7th month, which will be Feast of Trumpets, true Feast of Trumpets. So very likely, it's a real likely possibility for the rapture to happen at that moment, within the solar eclipse, or hours later or a day later, just like we saw on the music video there, because we are entering here a very high possibility, probability, for the trumpet to sound, either on the Feast of Trumpets or before the Feast of Trumpets there on the solar eclipse. And if that doesn't happen, we can expect the rapture or the trumpet to sound a few days after, because on the 10th day of the 7th month, it is precisely the Day of Atonement. If this is to be a Jubilee year, which the war in Israel after 50 years from the Yom Kippur War, maybe pointing to this year being a Jubilee year, then on the Jubilee year, the last trumpet is sounding on the 10th day of the 7th month, Day of Atonement. And that is, if that is to be true, then we could still be here by October 24th and 25th, which will be very interesting, because as we know, the Jews are 1 month in advance. On that date, the Jews will understand that is the date that Noah entered the ark, because for them it will be the 10th day of Heshvan, the 10th day of the 8th month. And 10th day of the 8th month is then when prophetically Noah entered the ark. So we could be leaving very soon on the next few days with the solar eclipse, or a day after that on the true Feast of Trumpets, or we could go on October 24th and 25th. That will be the true date of atonement. For the Jews will be the date that Noah entered the ark. Or if we wait a little longer, on the 14th and 15th day of the 7th month, which will fall for us on the 29th of October and on until November, that will be the true Feast of Tabernacles. For the Jews, the Feast of Tabernacles for them will be the day that the flood came on the 17th day of the 8th month, the Heshvan month. So very interesting possibilities here that we have for now, for the solar eclipse, and then 10 days later, up to 17 days later, which will fall precisely for the Jews as well, the day that Noah entered the ark and the day the flood came. So very nice high watch dates that we have ahead of us. I hope that this is it, because things are getting very hard. I've not been able to do live streams anymore because my computer is overheating. I have to buy another computer very soon because this one is about to die. And the last video that I posted on my channel, I had to delete it because I was fighting a cult that is growing quickly here in Brazil, which they are worshipping fallen angels. There are sighting and interesting things happening in a place here in Brazil which is associated with fallen angels, and thousands of people are entering in that cult, which are dealing with demonic worship. They are dealing with alien deception, and because I made a video against that, many things start to happen here as a form of counter attack from them that are being exposed by me. So a lot of things started to happen here in my home because of it, and I believe that's also because we are very close to the end. That's why the deception are growing larger and larger, and that's why the attacks are being stronger and stronger against us. So Please pray for me, pray for my family, and I really hope to see you guys very, very soon on the rapture of the church, perhaps here on the total solar eclipse, on the finger of the constellation of Virgo, the last day of the month of Virgo, perhaps on that, or a few days afterwards. I hope that this is it, because it's getting very tough here. But I hope to see you guys very, very soon in the rapture of the church, in the kingdom of our beloved God, Jesus Christ, Yahushua HaMashiach. And I pray that you are blessed by this video, and that we all finish this race faithfully until the end. Amen. Maranatha.